How many do not realize that Google can't see your Marionette app just out of the box? Has anyone heard of that concept before, that crawlers and search engines tend not to execute JavaScript in order to build a rendered version of your page? So whatever content your app provides using JavaScript won't be seen by traditional search engines. And so what I'd like to talk about today is how to enable your Marionette app to be indexed by search engines and to be accessible by Facebook and Twitter and their scrapers. So what I'd like to talk about specifically, like I said, is enabling SEO. So enabling search engines and scrapers to find your content. I won't be talking about how to optimize your content for better search rankings, and I won't discuss social strategy. So the goal, I'm going to cover quite a bit and you'll get a lot of information, but if you keep this in the back of your mind, my goal is that you'll come away with one thing you can apply to your app, even if it's a small tip, all the way up to a full scale, getting your app visible in a search engine, that you can apply to your own app or a future one. So many of you probably have heard this before, but traditionally the web worked in that you requested a page from a server and you got back all the content at once as HTML. And crawlers, in the advent of search, were built to scan, to make that page request, parse that HTML, and index it. And crawlers today still do that. They still make one request to the server, and they'll index that first response. JavaScript apps, however, full-blown client-side JavaScript apps like Marionette and Backbone and Angular and Ember, their first HTML response contains only a small application harness and no content whatsoever. To show you what I mean, take my home page for example. So this is built with a static site generator. This is pure HTML, and as you would expect, all of that content is in the embedded HTML in that very first response from the server. Now take this little demo application that renders events on a day calendar. This is done entirely with JavaScript and a few different templates. And let's take a look at what the source for this is, what you get back from the server. It's all really good stuff. You've got the styles, you've got a little empty calendar region, you have your templates, and then down here some scripts. This is a very simple app, has no build step, has no assets optimization, as you normally would, but you'll notice one thing you don't see are those events. You don't see sample item, sample location, you don't see start and end times, nothing. So if a search engine were to look at this, they wouldn't find anything meaningful. And that's the issue that I'm addressing today. So why is that important? Well, traditionally, the way you get traffic to your site is through a search engine, and that's still true today. In addition to search engines, however, we have social media, and that's becoming equally important because social media is accessible on mobile devices, accessible everywhere. And there's a new concept now that your content is now an object on a social graph. And you want your content to participate with this social graph. Now that sounds complicated, but it's really not. So let's take Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. And let me just post a status about it. Hang on a second. We've got a really cool link just popped up, and all I did was paste in a pure link. That's because in the time it took for me to paste that link, Facebook's scraper sent a request over to IMDb, pulled down the HTML for that page, and lifted from it Open Graph metadata tags that contained the title, a description, and a picture. And Facebook rendered that for you in a beautiful manner that objectified IMDb's content within their service. That's a really cool feature that everyone's doing these days, and it's a very important part of your mobile strategy. If I were to search this for those tags, you would find them right here, right in the source, right in that HTML response. You've got a meta tag, property OG image, content, and here's your picture content. Okay, that's awesome. Well, if this page at IMDb was generated purely by JavaScript, then that tag would never have made it to the page. And that's a problem, because then Facebook wouldn't have seen anything interesting. It would have just been an empty link. So, what do you do with the fact that you don't get that behavior from Marionette out of the box, or Angular, or Ember, or plain Backbone, or homegrown jQuery spaghetti code? You don't get any of that. The option number one is always an option. You can just throw in the towel. Number two, you can go back to server-side rendering. What we've been doing for the longest time, what we're still doing today, you hit the server generates that HTML, boom. You can pray to the SEO gods, which is not entirely a joke. I'll get to that. Half server-side, half client-side. So you can send some content down with the server, and then let JavaScript do the other half. There's this concept of hybrid, where the client and server share views, they share templates, and then so in that first request to the server renders the HTML, but then from then on the client runs with it in JavaScript. Then you have Isomorphic, where your entire JavaScript app is actually running on the server. So when you first access that page, it's like you accessed it in your own browser, except it was on the server, and then it just returns that result, and you continue on from there. And then the final one, which sounds the most complicated, but is actually by far, and you'll find out, the most simple, and I should say, I don't want to give anything away, but it's a headless browser behind a reverse crawler proxy. I know you're on the edge of your seats now. Okay, full server side. Henrik Jortig made a good point. If you're working on a simple app, use a simple solution. Use the solution that makes sense. Marionette apps take time to build. They have a lot of advantages. Interactivity, a very appy feel. Like if you're going to log in and use this app for 15 minutes, Marionette's going to make it an awesome experience. But what if you're just going to a site for like a simple information about a company, and that's it? You're really just coming and going. Or what if you have a blog or a simple landing page? If your content is mostly static, limited interactivity. Those are all good candidates for going server side. And really server side is not something it's crusty old from the 90s. There's some really cool new things going on with it, specifically static site generators. And what you'll love about these is you get to code your templates in a really clean, dry, don't repeat yourself manner, and then they become pure HTML, old school HTML. And what's awesome about that is even under an intense denial of service attack, these sites can stand up to a load. And you can host them for free. So you really don't get more robust than that. And so if your needs don't go beyond the needs for a static site, there's no reason to look farther. Then you have, if you want to add in a database, you might consider a server-side framework. If you want users to be responsible for the content, you might consider a content management system. Or there are site builders out there if you're just helping a friend like I am set up a business front page. And so there's no reason to look farther than Strikingly for something like that. So keep that in mind. Simple sites deserve a simple solution. All right, then there's another potential solution here: push and pray, or pray to the SEO gods. This is actually legitimate because for everyone who doesn't want to worry about it, someone is answering. That answer is coming slowly and maybe not fast enough for most of us, but they did decide that the Google bot should render JavaScript. Even though that's a very expensive thing to do, they said it's worth it. And that's a quote from their article. And afterward, you can check out the references at the end, but I've linked that article. So other services may follow, but they haven't yet. So that brings up some questions. Do we want more than just Google? Well, after just explaining the advantages of appearing on the social graph, almost certainly. Or if you want to be indexed by Bing, definitely. Still, it's early. You might want to, if you were to rely on Google, you might want to check through their webmaster tools what your site actually looks like. And then there's an open-ended question I haven't found the answer to. If Google renders your JavaScript, does that impact your initial page load speed metric? And are you penalized in any way? So the verdict is I'm excited, but I'm going to put that excitement on hold for a couple years. If you wanted to see what I was talking about, seeing how your site renders in Google, this is a very important thing for SEO. Sign up for a free Google account. I'm sure you have one already. And then register your site with Google Webmaster Tools. It's also free. Then there's a really cool couple buttons here under the crawl section. You've got fetch and render. And now this seems like an unassuming button. They just added one more word joined by and. But behind that button is a very expensive operation. The whole point of client-side JavaScript is that the end user's computer is doing all the rendering, taking on all that computation. Well, Google decided they're going to take on that computation and render everything, including getting all of the resources, images, external JavaScript necessary. That's a lot of bandwidth to build every page, and it's a lot of processing power to build every page. But remember that day calendar I showed you? Well, let's put it in here. Day calendar, fetch and render. Render requested. That's all you have to do. But I do have one complete right here. This is what the fetch shows. It's the plain old HTML and no content. But then they render. And they do a really outstanding job of it. So that's neat. That says that we won't be having this same kind of presentation in a couple years. And then you go to Fetch's Bing. So, well, they've got the fetch button, but they don't have that magic fetch and render button yet. Complete. So here's what you get back from them, and this is the application harness without any content. It has not been executed. So. All right, half and half. So we interact with these kind of apps all the time. Dropbox is one. Behind the logins, you don't really get into the app until you log in. So that means everything inside your app you don't want it indexed anyway because it's private user data. Or you might have something that you'd advertise publicly, like your meetup calendar, but that data changes so constantly that you don't want to index that either. Well, surrounding that app, you've got this landing page, and you've got this blog, and you've got these static pages. And that's all really good stuff that you do want indexed. So you could conceivably use two apps for that, a static app and a client app inside of it. So you can use a simple Rails, Ruby on Rails, or some server-side framework starter kit for the landing page. Literally get up and running with that in seconds, and then inside the user area of the site, you drop one line of code to start your app. And I can show you what that looks like because I did that recently. Or this is a very early work in progress. Actually. So once you log in, what you're actually seeing here, everything on this header and everything in the footer, and if you were to go to any of these static pages about help or legal terms of service, etc., those are all generated by a starter kit called Drywall, which is a Node.js backend, and it literally does everything for you. It gives you user management, it gives you all of that, but then inside of here is a Marionette application, which I don't care about Google accessing. In fact, I don't want Google to access it. So this works perfectly in this scenario. And if you're curious, under server is literally the code from drop-in code from that drywall, and under client, this is your usual Marionette stuff. Then inside inside the app.js file, this is what that came with Drywall. I added a single line, and it says use the client folder to serve as a static folder, just static HTML and stuff. And that's where the Marionette files live. And then right inside the account template this is the template that's rendered once the user is signed in. I'm saying start my app. And that's if you're comfortable with those steps, then that can be a real advantage. So what you get is snappy initial page load for the static pages. You can maintain your static pages separately, separate code base, all that. Disadvantages: if you need to show your app in more than one place, if you need to show your app, it can become messy and intertwined. You don't want that. You might end up with two different kinds of style code, two different kinds of template code. You have to be okay with that. But again, it's your use case. I'm going to fly through hybrid because hybrid is a way of sharing views, client and server. That was attempted in the last couple years, and this has largely been deprecated for a few different reasons by Isomorphic JavaScript. So in Isomorphic JavaScript, you actually run your entire JavaScript app on the client and the server. And by the way, if you want to hear exactly what was wrong with hybrid and why Isomorphic replaced it, then talk with me. But I'm not going to actually recommend you use either one, so I didn't want to waste too much time. But you run the entire JavaScript app on the server. So like I said in the intro, when you first access that URL, the server runs your whole app, but just like it were sitting in a browser, returns the HTML, and then the client then runs with it. So you've got some really great advantages. You've got perfect SEO. It's behaving the way the web was always meant to behave. That first request returns that HTML that you care about. Your content's in it. You get a pretty quick initial page rendered because really you're just making one request, you're getting back HTML, rendering it. That's it. It's old school. That's what browsers do best. They're doing other things really well too, but those are newer developments. So, and once it's set up, this is a hypothesis. I imagine, I haven't worked with one, I imagine it's relatively maintainable too, because you've got this unified code base between the client and the server. So things aren't getting hairy. In hybrid, you could have diverging code bases. a number of problems. Still, I wouldn't classify it as having really, I couldn't think of any disadvantages so much as hurdles, because it requires a bit of a feat of engineering to accomplish for your app. And any existing app would have to be perhaps dramatically re-engineered, or advanced planning would be required for a new app. It also has an opinion about your stack. It really only works when you have Node.js running on the server. It does require additional libraries and strategy on the server and the client to make sure what the server renders is handed off seamlessly to that client JavaScript app that we're all used to using. But anyway, the advantages of having a snappy initial page response and flawless SEO are worth it, especially if you have a large, profitable app such as Airbnb. And they have made a number of publications lately about isomorphic JavaScript and have made great strides with it. They're using it for one of their own mobile apps. And there are different technologies that will enable you to render JavaScript on the server in that manner. I named a few here. You can check them out later. And there are different ideologies, actually, for running JavaScript on the client and the server. And the key is that we're concerned about, and what Airbnb does is it renders that JavaScript. It renders all of your HTML on the server and then returns it. Meteor does some other interesting things that I would love to talk about later, but this is essentially what's returned from the server in Airbnb's method. So they render everything on the server, but everyone knows, or okay, if you've been using Marionette for a while, I don't want to make it sound like I didn't learn this until 6 months in, maybe, for a little while. But once you've been using Marionette for a while, you become comfortable with the fact that a model is attached to a view, and a view is attached to HTML sitting in your DOM. So model view, view HTML. So this, when you return all of that rendering from the server, you don't really have your views yet, and you don't have your models yet. Well, you need a way to attach your existing Marionette app to this result, this really elegant, well-engineered result from the server. And Airbnb is doing that through embedding data model ID and data view into the HTML that comes back. So if this is way over your head or makes perfect sense, all of us are in the same camp. We all understand this takes engineering, and it just what's your use case? Is that extra effort worth it? And obviously, I'm still wrapping my head around it. If I were to try to get something like that work, it would be a few months of research, likely, before I was really comfortable with it. So very powerful. Extra effort should be validated by your use case, and it's an area for more research. Now we get back to the final one, which is also, like I said, the easiest. So it works on any JavaScript app. It works with any stack. It's one additional line of application code. It takes 15 minutes to implement if you're comfortable with jumping and changing your web server configuration. No additional engineering, and it's performant, at least as far as search engines and scrapers are concerned. The pages come back really fast, because if you're doing it well, you're caching those pages. This does not. This does, however, require a separately maintained server or a paid service. Okay, I'll take that in stride. The neutral is it doesn't do anything for your users, positive or negative. So it's not an enhancement for your users per se. This is strictly looking at the SEO aspect. And now we get to some really interesting details. I really don't want to spend too much time on these details, but Google invented a secret handshake for this exact method of crawling your app in 2009, and it's a little known method of using hash-bang URLs. And like I said, this is all going to condense down to something you can take away, I promise, and run with it, even though it seems it's a lot of information. So, but really, what Google does is if you change your app in a certain way, if you make your app behave according to a certain protocol, then Google will send a hint to your web server that, hey, I'm a crawler, give me the special full HTML. So all you have to do, and by the way, Bing, Yahoo, and Facebook respect the standard. I'm pretty sure others would, but I just haven't verified that. There's something for those that don't support this as well. So another way besides hash-bang URLs is to insert this meta tag into your content and into the top of your head. And yeah, I'm just realizing this is pretty intense stuff. So what this is saying is if you stick that meta tag inside the top of your HTML document that comes back in that application harness, then when the crawler sees that, they're gonna go back to the server and say, hey, I'm a crawler, give me that special data. And that's really the most important part. It does the same thing as having hash-bang URL. So this is all that your web server would need in order to respond to that, hey, I'm a crawler, give me that special HTML. This is all that it would need. So it's basically saying if I am one of these user agents here, one of these bots that don't follow the hash-bang protocol, then go ahead and I'm a crawler. And this is what Google sends up. This is what Google sends up to the web server, this escape fragment key in the query string to advertise that, hey, I'm a crawler. And so if any of those conditions are true, then what you want to do is send your app over to this crawler service. And still, I know this is complicated, but it's going to get much simpler in a second. This slide is about what would you do if you wanted to create that crawler service yourself. You would put make a web service, and inside of that you would have a headless browser. And so all the secret sauce of this, hey, I'm a crawler, please give me that HTML, is the server boots up a browser instance, just like running on your laptop. And inside that browser instance, it renders the entire page. And then once that page is rendered, it returns that rendered result back. So it's just like accessing it from your laptop, except it's on the browser, and the browser's returning that. So essentially, you're doing the hard work for the crawler. The crawler is saying, I'm lazy, I don't want to render that JavaScript, so the server's like, okay, I'll render that JavaScript, and returns that HTML for you. So I did build one of these with some neat features to make it resilient. Took a week in Node.js, and then out came pre-render. And they did it better. And they did it for free. So if you were to run a pre-render server on your own, you would just need a server. They have open sourced their entire project for free. So you would need 3 commands. You need to clone the project, install the project, and run server.js. So if you can type 3 commands, you can self-host your own pre-render server that does all of that JavaScript rendering that we need, but crawlers don't like to do. They have a free tier that starts with 200 pages for free, and that comes with caching. Plus, when I said they work on any stack, this is a real external this is a service that's external to your app. It's just like your browser. It spins up the app and then outputs that result. And there are adapters for all the major web servers, so it works with your setup. The other thing it gives you, which is really cool, is that something to consider when you're in a backbone or a marionette app, you end up requesting a page that doesn't exist. Your backbone router probably has an entry at the end of it that says, hey, if nothing matched, send them to the I don't know what to do page. That's not actually a real, that's not something that a crawler is going to interpret correctly. The crawler doesn't care if you made a pretty graphic that says, whoops, something happened, or that doesn't exist. The crawler is going to care only about a hard HTTP status code. So what pre-render does is if your pretty page that you made in your app that says not found, post this meta tag to the page, then what pre-render will do is it will serve a hard 404 on your behalf. And that works with any status code if you wanted to do temporarily moved, permanently relocated, internal server error. So I think I mentioned if you host it yourself, you probably want to set up caching. You want to make sure memory leaks don't end up crashing the server because browsers and JavaScript apps can be leaky. A pre-render instance can just grow in size. It's not supposed to, but it happens. You want to be able to handle a bunch of crawler requests at once, and you want to make sure you get back online if you've crashed. Now the pre-render does most of that for you, but it's still something you have to keep in the back of your mind if you're hosting it yourself. Now, like I said, they will do that for you. Now, I'm going to come full circle, and hopefully this will be amazing. But we're back to this calendar again, which Google likes, but Bing doesn't. And I'm kind of sad about that. And let's remind ourselves one final time what the application harness looks like. And it's just your imports, your scripts, very empty little container, lonely empty container, and then all of this JavaScript. Well, if I were to take that link and pass it over, because remember I said it took 3 commands to get pre-render running? Well, I did that myself. And so this, believe it or not, is my pre-render server. 3 commands. And I'm going to basically go to that server with the page that I want to render. And wow, it looks exact. I must have made a mistake. I must have just gone to my website. It must be just routing me to my website. Well, we'll find the truth in a second when we look at the page source, and wait a second. That lonely empty container now has all of the content in it. All of the content. And those script tags, which could be cause unexpected behavior if a crawler decided to get pre-render is really smart. Let me back this up a second. If Google accesses your pre-rendered page and those script tags were there, Google, which is now rendering JavaScript, would rerun the JavaScript on your page, and then you would end up with a mess. And so what pre-render does is it will remove any script tags from that output before it goes out. Just so you know, all you have to do to get this going is go to prerender.io and follow a couple instructions, and I would be more than happy to walk you through those instructions. And then there would be a little bit of code that you have to pass over to whoever's running your web server to make sure it's all working. But when I said like 3 lines, it's 3 lines and then that's it. So, all right. So additional thoughts when you're considering SEO. Make sure that whenever you encounter an issue, that you're returning a hard HTTP status code to your to the crawler. Prerender happens to do that. Use robots.txt. There's a link provided at the end for more research to exclude any areas of the site you don't want them poking into. This is not a security measure. It's mainly because a malicious bot will ignore that. However, sometimes you don't want Google you don't want Google even bothering with the user area of the site or the area of the site that's being changed every hour, and you don't want that indexed. So just remember to use robots.txt. Remember to generate a sitemap.xml to prioritize crawling, and there are tools that'll just generate one for you. One of them's a good one's $25. I haven't done this yet. I think developers are lazy, so I haven't done this yet, but from the research for this presentation, I know I need to do that from now on. And then register with Google and Bing Webmaster Tools. You can upload your sitemaps.xml to them. You can find out if their crawlers are actually complaining about anything. And because if they're complaining, that means you're not getting the visibility that you want. And don't forget to develop for social. And so I'm passing along some links to Open Graph metadata. Facebook has some awesome tools for, one of them is called the Facebook linter. And I know all of you are going to use this, so I'm just going to show you the Facebook linter. If this is the only thing you get from the presentation, then you're good, because this is cool. So let's give that Guardians of the Galaxy link to the Facebook linter, and bump this up. So it gives all the scraper results. And in fact, it shows you what tags it found, and you get to decide if that's correct. It will also whine at you if you are missing required tags, or like I think URL is required. So if you want to participate with this, they'll let you know if there's anything wrong. So and Twitter has a neat new feature where, maybe it's been out for a while, where any links that you post on Twitter, they'll like generate this cool looking card underneath of it. And that's also based on the same concept, and they have a similar linter feature as well.